Hello! My name is Lakin and welcome to my channel. And today it's the end of April, so that means we're doing a April wrap-up. Before I get started diving into the books and my thoughts on each and every one of them, I wanted to throw some stats up. I enjoy when other people put stats in their wrap-ups, so I took a little bit of time before filming this to figure out some interesting things. I don't know. I may be the only one that finds it interesting. In the month of April, I read 14 books. The last book that I read this month, I technically finished it today, which is May 1st. I finished it while I was getting ready, and I realized I only had 10 minutes left of it, so I'm counting it in April, because basically I read all of it in April, minus the last couple pages. It was an okay month. It got better towards the end of it, because at the beginning there was it was mostly 2 stars. The very last week I read some great books, so it became a much better month as we went on. I listened to 8 audiobooks and read 6 physical books. With all the books combined, including the audiobooks, the total of pages I read was 4,156. 3 of the books I read were YA, 9 were adult. Now, if you're like, that doesn't match up with the number you read, I didn't include the 2 graphic novels I read in the dividing. Genre dividing wise is a little tricky, so some of them I've counted them as 2 different genres. I read 4 paranormal books, 5 historical fiction, 2 graphic novels, 2 classics, 2 mystery thrillers, 1 memoir, 1 horror. Whenever I was reading it, I didn't think it was horror, but that was the only genre that I could find for it. I don't know. 1 fantasy and 1 contemporary. Now, breaking down my star ratings, I read 4 5-star books. I read 5 4-star books. I read 2 3-star books. And I read 3 2-star books. So basically, all the numbers just kind of flipped. I'm going to go ahead and start with the 5-star books and work my way down. And we will finish this off with the 1 book that I DNF'd this month. The first book I gave 5 stars to was The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. And this is the final book in the Truly Devious series. I enjoyed this series so much, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I had read it when it first came out and I had to have waited for each book, because in my personal opinion, this could have just been one big book. And I understand that she probably needed to break it down to get that much detail into 1 book without it being 5,000 pages. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought the story was inventive and fun. I enjoyed going back in time and stuff like that. I've talked a lot about this book because last month I read the other 2, so I don't have many new ideas. There are a few things I didn't love about the book, but they weren't enough to actually ruin my reading experience or drop down my rating. It was the characters didn't evolve any. They stayed very one-dimensional, and they were all lovable. It was like they had 1 personality trait, and that was it. That was a little annoying, and the relationship between the main character and her love interest, I don't know. I don't believe it. At times I thought it was really cute and At other times I was like, what are you doing? I don't think y'all actually like each other. You're just pushing yourselves together. I saw the ending coming, but I still enjoyed. I thought it was very well done, so that even though I knew what was happening, I didn't get bored. if you are willing to read 3 books for the price of 1, definitely check this series out. My second 5-star book was The Last Bathing Beauty by Amy Sue Nathan. I read this one during my 1950s readathon, and I have a reading vlog up of that if you want to watch me read a bunch of books either written or set in the 1950s. This was such a cute book. Again, if you watch that video, you'll see a lot of my thoughts. In this story, we follow our main character, Betty, in 2 different times in her life. The first is when she is 18 and right out of high school during the summer of 1951, and the other time is when she is 80-something years old in 2017. She is trying to look back on her past and understand it and comes to terms with it, and reflecting on what happened in that summer that changed everything. The going back and forth I thought was going to get confusing, but it didn't, because in the present or future, whatever you want to consider it, she is known as Boop, and in the past she is known as Betty. And later on during the story, we find out why the name change happens and where it comes from. Everything is explained beautifully. Now, because she is reflecting on the past of that summer, we know a big sum of what happens, and the rest is very easily guessed. But just like the other book, even though I knew what was happening, it did not bore me. The adventure was just as much fun. I didn't need to be shocked to enjoy it at all. It was just a light, fun read and made me want the summer to be here so fast. My next 5-star read is My Brother's Husband, Volume 1. I am not going to say the author's name because I do not want to butcher it, and I know I will. They deserve so much better than that. This book was so good. I love the art so much. Especially like that. Like, this doesn't spoil anything, but like, oh, so cute. And there were some pages where the shower, the bath time for the grown men was very detailed. It didn't show anything it didn't need to show, but it showed everything else. And it was just funny, like, going through, like, this, like, cute little book and then being like, oh, okay. By the end of chapter 1, I was already wrapped around this little book's finger. I felt all the emotions. I am holding it wrong. I feel so much for Mike Flanagan, which is this character right here. He is the brother's husband, and the brother died, I think it says like a month ago, and so he has come to visit and see where his husband had grown up, and he is staying with our main character and his daughter. This book kind of goes on the adventure of them trying to become okay with each other, and the brother is dealing with the loss of his brother that he had lost touch with, and also he says he was okay with his lifestyle, but he also has some subconscious inner turmoil about what is right and what is okay, but we really see some development and some softness grow towards them all coming together, and it was just so cute. I can't wait to read the next one. Hopefully when the library opens, and then once it's safe, I can quickly pick it up. And the last 5-star that I read was actually the last book I read this month, so ending it on a high note, and it was actually the 3rd book in a series, and I read the 2nd one also this month, So I'll talk about it a little bit later. But the book I'm talking about now is Blameless by Gail Carriger. It is the third book in the Parasol Proctigate, Protectorate, something series. And it is a steampunk historical fiction with werewolves and vampires and all this stuff. It's just... I had discovered Gail Carriger and her writing last year, or actually I think in 2018, and I fell in love, but for some reason I stopped reading the series. Like, I didn't read the second one. I can't remember what happened, but something happened and I wasn't able to read it, and then it just left the back of my mind. I've come to realize again that steampunk is my guilty pleasure in a subgenre. Like, it's so cool. I love it so much. But in Blameless, I can't really discuss what it's about without giving the other books away. But the series as a whole is about a main character named Alexia Terabody. She is a preternatural, which means she has no soul, and her touch, if she touches a werewolf or a vampire, they will turn human for as long as she is touching them. It's just going on an adventure with her. Look into it for yourself. I can't give enough praises for this series. And also, all the Gail Carriger books I've read, I've loved. And there are 2 more in this wrap-up, so sorry, but not sorry. Now, we will move right along to the 4-star books. And the first 4-star book I read was a long title, so don't mind me, but I'm gonna read it. And it is Funny, You Don't Look Autistic, A Comedian's Guide to Life on the Spectrum by Micheal McCreary. Memoirs are kind of funny to review because you're basically like rating someone's life and how they view and look back on their own life. But I gave this one 4 stars because I found it entertaining and funny. I picked up this book off of Libby because it was the like library book club where like basically everyone could pick it up without having to wait on a hold for a copy to be released. So I thought, why not, you know? It isn't like funny, laugh out loud funny, but it's funny as in like it's entertaining and it's not boring to where you skim over it and you're like, when is this done? You know? Not much really to say about it. It was interesting to read and interesting to look into a life that I'll never fully understand because I am not on the spectrum. It helped me to maybe think more and be more aware about people in general. Not just people who are on the spectrum, but just people in general, you know? My next 4-star read was My Lovely Wife by Samatha Downing. This was a domestic thriller. In this one, we follow the murderers. Pretty early on in the book, a body is found, and we are following the couple. It's a man and a wife who do it together for date night fun. And we follow them as the investigation unfolds. They're trying to copycat this serial killer who had killed in this town before. And they were trying to pretend to be him. It's very interesting, it's very fun, but in the end, the twist was not surprising. And even though for other books, I've said that I've seen the ending coming, but for mystery thrillers, the twist is the most exciting part. I feel like that's why most people read thrillers, is to be surprised, to be shocked, to be like, whoa, what just happened? I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I knew enough to where when it did happen, I was like, okay, you know, didn't ruin it to where I hated the book, and it didn't completely ruin it because it was still an interesting and new take on a domestic thriller. But yeah, because it was a little let down in that department. I gave it 4 stars. And also the ending, not gonna spoil it, but the ending didn't really make sense. It was like, how is that possible, you know? How is that allowed? I'm not gonna say much more, but yeah. As someone who enjoys reading lots of thrillers, the twist wasn't surprising. The next 4-star read I read was Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I read this one as well during my 1950s readathon, and it was a reread. So I already knew what I was getting into, and I still enjoyed it so much. I give a lot of my thoughts in that other video, so I'm going to try to keep it short here. But who knows? In this book, we follow a group of boys who have crash landed on an island, and there are no adults. Boys are like 6 to 14, I think. And they are having to survive and try to get rescued off of this island. Everything quickly turns sour. It gets a little hectic. I know a lot of people don't enjoy this book because they were forced to read it. I would say give it another shot. I don't blame you if you don't like it, because there are a lot of books that I was forced to read that I didn't enjoy, but we're there. Actually, that may be a lie. Yeah, I think that's a lie. But I know most people don't enjoy reading what they're forced to read. I think it's interesting. It pulls an interesting conversation out, talking about civilization and who we really are at the core of our being and stuff like that. The next 4-star book I read was Manners and Mutiny, the 4th book in the Finishing School series by Gail Carriger. I thought I had finished this series when I first read it. Like, I read them all like right in a row, and I thought I had finished it. But as I was looking through my Goodreads, to do that TBR jar a while back, I realized I hadn't, and I was so upset at myself. So I finally got around to reading it, and so glad I did. I thought I was going to be so confused diving into this series that I had read in 2018 and diving into the last book of it, but I was not confused at all. As soon as I dove in, I was sucked back into the world, and I was able to pick up right where I left off. Like, they would mention things that had happened, and memories would come back, and it'd be like, oh yeah, this happened, and this happened, and this is how it ended, and stuff like that. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And once I finished this book, I realized that she has some novellas, and one is actually coming out pretty soon, featuring the other side characters from the Finishing School series. So I can't wait to read those and get back into this world. In this series, I'm not going to talk much about the 4th book because that will spoil everything for you. But if you're interested in this series, we follow a main character named Sophronia, and she is sent off to finishing school. But it's not just a normal finishing school during that time. It is actually a finishing school where they train spies, and it is up in a dirigible, which is a big floating balloon, and the school just kind of floats around training a bunch of girls to be spies during the 1700s. One of their teachers is a vampire, one of their teachers is a werewolf, and they have to fight these, like, sky pirates called Flyaway Men. And then there's another school that they are, like, buddies with that trains evil geniuses. So it is so much fun. Sophronia has a little dog that is a mechanical dog, and his name is Bumbersnoot, and he's probably one of my favorite characters of the whole series. And I have no other words. I'm I'm so glad I refound this love, this guilty pleasure for steampunk paranormal, because I'm having so much fun. And the next book is another Gail Carriger. The last one, I promise, at least for this video. And it is Changeless, the second book in the Parasol Protectorate series by Gail Carriger. I don't know why I have the second book and not the first one, but I do. So I finally read it. I think the reason I stopped reading this series is because I wanted to read it with my husband, and reading a physical book was a lot harder, and I couldn't find the audiobook version for it. So it got lost in the background. But finally, after reading the Manners and Mutiny, finishing off that series, I knew I had to pick this up. Just update my husband on key points. And once I had finished the finishing school and then I picked this one up, I realized that characters that were in the finishing school series were in this one. And it was such a nice surprise to see them, because I had first read the Solace book first, and then I read the finishing school series. And then I read this one. I didn't realize in the first one that they were connected. In this one, I realized they were, and I got to see some of the girls, a vampire, one of the vampires, and it was just nice to see them. I think this series is set 20 years after the finishing school series, but it was such a nice surprise to realize that all her books are connected. They all kind of flow in this one timeline, so I'm gonna continue reading it in order, hopefully. I want to talk about this book so much. Maybe I'll make a Gail Carriger, deep dive list for you, or just a gush video for me. But, because I don't want to spoil the first one, but in this one, all I have to say is I gave it 4 stars because of the ending. The ending was not bad at all, but it was just so sad. And I was like, why are you gonna end it right there? How could you end it right there? It was so sad that I was like, I don't want to give it 5 stars. My favorite character, probably in this whole series, is Lord Macon. He is a werewolf, and he is the alpha of the London pack, and he is so funny, and he kind of reminds me of my own husband, except for my husband's not as gruff and not as hairy, and he's also not a werewolf, but still. He's just so funny, and every time he would speak, I would laugh out loud. And then one of the characters, this is not a spoiler, but one of the characters that is introduced in this book, his name is Channings of the Chesterfield Channings. Or Channington of the Chesterfield Channings. I'm sure none of the reviews for my Gail Carriger books are making any sense, but you just need to read them. Oh my goodness. If you had told me before that I would fall in love with steampunk historical fiction, I would have been like, okay, but I want to read all the steampunk, even if it's not paranormal, which paranormal makes it a little bit better, especially if it focuses on werewolves. Although the vampires in this book are not half bad. I love Lord Akadama. Akadama? I don't know how to say it. He's a very frivolous, well-dressed, gay vampire, and he's best friends with Alexia. It's just so funny. He's always hunting for the latest gossip. I'm gonna move on to the next book, because otherwise I'm just gonna continuously talk about it. Now moving on to the 3-star books. Both of these books I enjoyed, but I also have nothing to say about them. I didn't love them. I didn't hate them. The first one is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I don't know. I don't really have much to say on this book compared to all the other books. It's just weird. I don't know if I fully wrapped my head around what was happening. This is the book that was in the horror genre, and I was like, this was not scary at all. I wish she had explained the tox, which is the sickness that the girls have, and they're kind of quarantined in their old school, just like locked off from the rest of the world, and the tox gives them these weird ailments where one girl has gills, our main character doesn't have an eye, and then another character has like a silver hand, stuff like that. Just weird, funky things. One girl has 2 hearts. So, it's just like no one has these same ailments. The people who could explain it to the girls all either die or vanish before they can explain it to them and therefore explain it to us. So by the end of the book, I was just like, okay, I don't know. The ending, it ends right, like, I feel like in the middle of a scene. I normally don't care for epilogues. Like, I feel like if you're gonna have an epilogue, you just have an extra chapter at the end. But this book, I would have loved an epilogue, like maybe like a couple months or a couple years in the future to just explain everything. But we didn't, or at least I didn't hear one because I listened to it. And the next 3-star book was the first volume of the Promised Neverland. Again, I am not going to pronounce the author's name because I do not want to disrespect them and butcher it as badly as I know I will. My husband picked this one out for both of us to kind of read because I've been really wanting to get into mangas because I enjoy animes, and so why not enjoy more anime in a different format, He picked this one up because I had already watched the first episode of this anime, and then we were like, oh, we can read it first and then watch it, I enjoyed this book, but because I had already watched the first thing, I basically knew what was happening. I thought it was interesting. I definitely am wanting to continue it in book form and then watch it. The only thing is, like, after chapter 3, it kind of gets repetitive. So if you don't know what this is about, I should probably explain. Really bad at that. We follow these characters right here, and they are in an orphanage, and they are cared for by this one lady they call Mom. Usually, once the kids leave the orphanage, a kid will leave every once in a while, and then they never hear from them again. And they're like, oh, it's probably just because they are loving their new family and just forgetting about the place that they all grew up, because they grow up there from when they're itty-bitty babies until the oldest ones are 11. No one over 12 stays. These 2 characters right here, when another one goes to leave, they follow. They see something they're definitely not supposed to see, and they realize what the true reason is for the orphanage, and it is not an orphanage at all. They're having to deal with that, and after chapter 3, it's basically the same thing over and over again. We get a little bit more information about like specific things, but it's basically like, oh, what are we gonna do? Oh, here's this thing. Okay, what are we gonna do? We gotta do this. We gotta get out. Yada, yada, yada. Still, the premise is so intriguing, and I can't wait to uncover more of this. Now we're on to my 2-star reads. The first 2-star book I'm going to talk about, I have a video where I read and talk about this book as well. And it is the video where my husband picks what I read. And that is Secret Vampire, or Night World Book 1 by L.J. Smith. He bought me this book not knowing it was a vampire book. He bought me this book because it was a pretty cover. And I can't blame him. It is very pretty. I gave it 2 stars because I feel like this would have been a book I would have enjoyed when I was younger if it was more about werewolves, you know? Because I'm just a werewolf person. I'm not a vampire person. But if I was, I would have enjoyed this book and lapped this book up when I was younger. Reading it now as an adult, it was just very comical. I think it was too short. The emotions that the characters go through, I think I referred to it as the Tower of Terror ride at Disney World. Just going up and down really fast with no rhyme or reason. I enjoyed reading it, but not for the sake of what I was supposed to be enjoying it for. I don't know what I was supposed to be enjoying it for. I was just kind of laughing at it. And I will not be continuing this series. So, yeah. If you want to see more of my thoughts on this book, you can watch the video I have on it, but yeah. Other than that, I will be keeping it because it was a gift and because it's pretty, but that's about it. The next 2-star read that I read was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I read this one during my 1950s readathon, so you can get that video. This was not the book I was expecting. This was not the book anyone had said it was, you know? I was expecting this, and then I got something totally different. It just wasn't for me, and I feel so bad. The premise is really exciting. We follow a firefighter who, in the future, firemen don't put out fires, they set fires. And they burn books because books are banned, because books have free thought. They don't want to offend anyone, and everyone wants to be happy, but it's basically just a surface level happy. So our main character begins to question that and tries to decide for himself if that's really the case. And he takes a book from one of the fires that he sets one time. And that's really it. The rest of it, I don't know what was happening, because there is a trigger warning for a suicide attempt, and that happens at the very beginning of the book, and I had to pause, text my husband because he had read this book before and was like, is this an actual attempt, or am I just reading wrong? Because no one cared, no one had any empathy. They just came and fixed her up and was like, okay, we gotta go. There's 20 more of these. It was I don't know. The book seemed very callous the whole time. I didn't care for any of the characters. I didn't feel for them. And the characters didn't care for the other characters at all either. It was really short. It felt like an essay. Just a more story essay. I would have loved if the world had been expanded more and it hadn't been so rushed. But, it is what it is. I'm at least glad I read it because it's one of those books that everyone talks about. So, there's that. The last 2-star book I have is The Secrets We Kept by Lara Prescott. I read this one in my 1950s reading vlog as well, so you can hear more of my thoughts, but this book was a hot mess. Trigger warning for sexual assault and rape. As we know, I don't care for that. I don't want to read any of that. But this is hopefully the last book I ever get surprised and read that type of trigger warning without my knowledge, But it was a hot mess. It was trying to be a spy book. It was also trying to be a romance book. It has a female-female romance, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed that a lot, and I enjoyed a couple of the POVs. It was just trying to be way too many things that I'm not even sure I can fully explain a synopsis for this book without just straight reading what it says on Goodreads. I was hoping for a female empowerment book set in the 50s dealing with spies and love and all this stuff. I sort of got that, but it was just a very diluted form of that. I think if the book had focused in on one thing and not 20 different things, it would have been a lot stronger of a book. That's all I have to say about that. So those are all the books I've read. One book that I DNF'd this month was The Color of Death by Bruce Alexander. This is just a straight up mystery set in the 1700s, and I don't know, it took me forever to read 40 pages. Like, a couple days. It was just so, like, I didn't think it was that dense, but apparently it was, because, like, I've never taken that long to read it, and I just wasn't interested in it. I was forcing myself to read it, and the way it talked about things kind of made me uncomfortable. Sir John Fielding, which this is a Sir John Fielding mystery. I thought he was kind of funny. He's a blind man who is a police detective. Yeah, he was funny, but it wasn't entertaining enough to try to continue reading it, so I don't even really know what happens in this book. I just picked it up from the library because I was scrolling through something else, I can't remember, and just seeing this, The Color of Death. Ooh, intrigue. That is not what I got. Those are all the books I've read. Hopefully I can edit this down to make it understandable and digestible for you. Maybe you found some books that you want to add to your TBR. Maybe you found some books that you know you definitely do not want to have on your TBR, or you need to take them off. Either way, I enjoyed what I read for the most part. Found some new favorites. I hope you have a great morning or evening whenever you're watching this. I hope you stay safe. I will see you in the next video, which will actually be later this week when I'm posting this, because I filmed a Camp NaNoWriMo monthly vlog, and so I'm going to be uploading that on Thursday, and I may start uploading more writing type videos on Thursdays as well. Stick around for that if you're interested. If not, my next bookish type video will be on Monday, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! My jaw. Goodness, like, can you talk too much? Oh my goodness, it's an hour.